What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to Optimize You. Today we talk about fear. What is fear? Why do we have fear? And some techniques and strategies you can use to combat fear and move towards your goals the whole year. Now, on to the podcast.
What is the first thing that comes to mind when you think of the topic of fear just in itself?
I mean, fear could really go a lot of different ways with this, obviously. I think it's what popped into mind when you said that is that every time I've had fear of something, whenever I get myself to do it, it's so much easier than what you kind of I think we like build up this story in our head of how something's going to be. And a lot of times we kind of, our brains are wired to like find the worst case scenario or negative scenarios. And so it's like we have it's like, oh, if I'm kind of thinking of, for me, like my job, right? I go into the home and I sell windows, doors, roofing, solar, right? So I'm going to the home, and like there's a lot of times when I'm driving up to a house where like maybe I have a 30-minute drive in traffic, whatever it is, and my mind will go to like those like very small one-off like terrible situations that I've had in homes, right? Where it's like the fear of like running into a bad scenario, right? And then like, but the thing about fear too, and that's his scenario, is like if I don't get my mind off that, then I'm subconsciously like going in with like, I think homeowners can sense that, or like anybody can sense our fear.
For
So like
sure.
if you have a job where it's like sales, I mean, you're, especially, I think people can sense it over the phone too, but maybe not as much as they can in person when they're like interacting with you face to face. So especially like outside sales or retail or anything like that, like people are going to sense if you have like a fear, or if you're like feeling weird that day, or if your mind's not in a good place and you're thinking negatively, all these different things. It's crazy how that works, but that's what popped into my head first, was that every time I've had fears, it's so much easier it's so much easier to do it than it actually is. But also at the same time, that like repetition with it. So it's like a fear of failure, right? A lot of times we have fears of failure, of that, oh, if I do this, I'm gonna fail, right? If I go and I try to lose this weight, or I try to develop this body that I'm going after, get my health in order. Like it's like well, is it worth doing? Because what if I fail? Like what if I start doing this and it's a complete waste because I just end up right back where I was? And so that's why a lot of people don't even start moving forward, is because they have this fear that it's not going to work out. But then that goes back to what I was talking about, where it's like the negative. We always like focus on the worst case scenario. And like a lot of times that's such a small percentage of that happening, unless if that's all we focus on, unless if we don't train our brain to focus on the possibility and the goals and the dreams and like the what if scenarios that are positively in our favor.
Yeah. So fear is one of those things where I think you can overthink it. One of the best things that you can do in my scenario is the way you combat that. Cause everybody's like, well, how do I do the thing that I'm most afraid of? And the thing that I do that personally helps me is you have to take it head on, right? It's like, you could think of like skydiving. I personally never skydived before. I don't know if you have, but like, that's a big one, right? Where people are like, it's almost, I remember one of the instructors saying, I was watching something and the instructor for the skydiving thing was saying, we try to talk to them the entire way up as we're ascending, so that we can distract them, so that they don't think about what they're doing as much, and so that we can immediately take action and jump out of this plane. And it's the same sort of thing where we overthink, man, it's going to be so tough to start our workouts. We have to have all the perfect gear. We have to have the membership. We have to have the right equipment if we're doing it at home. We have to have the best and most optimal, ideal program. I have to have everything prepped and measured, and maybe from a meal prep company. Like, man, I just don't have all those things. Like, we start thinking in those realms versus just like, what's that first step that I can take today that's going to make me a little bit better than the position that I'm in right now? And can I do it right now? And if you do that, of like, I'm going to do it I'll start next week, or, we've talked about that before too, procrastinating, pushing this out further and further and further, which then in turn gives our mind more time to think and think and think, right? Worst case scenarios, here comes that fear. It builds like this snowball effect versus just going, I can do a workout right now. I can do some air squats right now. I can do some push-ups right now. If I don't have the ability to do push-ups, I can do them on an elevated surface on a countertop. Like, I can do stuff right now. I can forego some of this processed shit that I was thinking about having for at lunch, and I can go get some chicken breasts. I can go get one of those rotisserie chicken ready to go. It's already cooked at the store, right? Like there's things that you can do right now. I can grab some cottage cheese. I can grab some Greek yogurt. I can grab some bananas. I can grab some fruit. Like you can start mixing things in right now. And I think it's super important. I think Steve Harvey said this. He's talking about entrepreneurship, but I think it goes with fear as well. As he was like, you basically are jumping out of the plane and figuring out how to use your parachute on the way down. Like people want to make sure that everything's like perfect and like, you know, the right wind conditions are here. Like we have the right amount of fuel in the plane, like all that stuff. It's all very important, right? But like at some point you got to jump, you got to just go and you got to figure it out on the way down. And I think just crossing bridges, crossing problems as they come and taking that mentality and that approach, knowing that you're going to scrape your knees in the process and that it's going to get dirty and it's not going to be clean. And I think we want, or we anticipate, we try to think of, and at least I do, I try to think of every worst thing that's going to happen. And I'm like, okay, how can I combat that before I even start? Right. And I think, I don't know if you think that way too, but like, that's the way I think. And that's just not the reality. That's just not how things get done, you know?
No, exactly. It is that overthinking. It is that trying to set up your life in the perfect way to be successful. It's the I'll start when mindset, right? It's like, oh, I got to get everything in order in my life and then I'll get going. But it comes down to what you always preach, start sloppy.
That's
Right.
it,
Just
man.
get going, take it head on. Like just legitimately do the first thing that you can think of that's going to move you in the direction of where you're trying to be. Right. And it's like you're never going to be ready. You're never going to be fully ready. But the best way to learn and move in that direction is by starting, just starting with one thing, figuring out what the first habit you could build is, deciding tomorrow that, you know what, when I wake up, I'm going to get a workout in, or I'm going to go on a walk, or, you know what, that first meal, like instead of going for cereal or something like from going to fast food, I'm going to start with like a yogurt bowl or oatmeal or overnight oats or, you know, like eggs or, you know, whatever it is that's going to be somewhat quality, high protein. That's going to start me off on the right foot. And it's just that one thing. It's, you know what reminds me of this is Jesse Itzler. You know, Jesse Itzler? He's awesome, right? He's like really like somebody who, you know, if you guys don't know who he is, like look at his stuff. Cause he just honestly preaches just living life just to the fullest, really, and just doing what you can to build like your life resume, which is really cool. But he also talks about like building a habit a month, right? And I think that is, he talks about how if you were to build one habit every month, 12 months from now, a year, you'd have 12 habits, 12 new habits. And nobody has 12 new habits every year, right? It's just
That's so
unrealistic,
true.
right? So it's like, but that's the thing is if we focus all our attention on one new thing every month, or even if you just took 2 months and you're like, you know, I'm going to build this habit over 2 months, that's 6 new habits over the course of the year. Maybe that for you is, you know what, I focused on getting 3 workouts in a week for 2 months. And that's what I did. I focused on the next month, getting up to a gallon of water a day. And then I focused my attention on getting X amount of protein in, right? And it's like all of a sudden over the course of 6 months, you're already like in a really good spot, working out 3 times a week, drinking a gallon of water, eating a pound or gram per pound of body weight of protein a day. And a lot of times people are so fearful of failing, but also so fearful of not having quick results too. I think where it's like, you know what, I want to do this, but my friend, he lost 20 pounds in his first month. And like, that's what I'm comparing myself to here. And you know what, if I do this habit thing, maybe I'll lose some weight, but it's not going to be anywhere near as fast as Tim lost the weight. You know, it's like, it's this comparison thing, which, you know, it's never good enough. It's that never good enough mindset too with a lot of folks, where it's like, if other people are doing things that are more successful in the grand scheme, you know, like in the grand scheme of what people focus on, which is the scale a lot of times, then what I'm doing isn't working, right? When in reality, you know, Tim probably didn't build any habits over the course of that weight loss, right? Where you know, are building these habits that are going to set you up to not even achieve your goal, whatever that goal is, but actually be able to maintain and sustain it after the fact too.
Yeah. And you know what's crazy? As you were talking, I was thinking one of the easiest ways to help also eliminate fear, in addition to just taking action, is keeping things as simple as possible. Like you gave some great examples right there. Like, what can I do? Can I swap out some breakfast? I think what we try to do is we see Sally, we see Joe, we see all these people, we get in that comparison mindset. And then we either try to replicate what they did, which a lot of times is so extreme, whether somebody's doing like 75 hard, like whatever it is, right? They're doing something crazy. So then they try to replicate it and then they fell short, which goes back to the thing that you're talking about with Jesse Itzler. It's like, dang, dude, imagine 12 months from now, you have 12 new habits. Like, that's insane. Let's just say you screwed up on, like, maybe, like, to your point, maybe it took you like 2 to 3 months just to create one of them. Okay, let's say instead of creating 12 by the end of the year, you had 8 or 9. Like, that's 8 or 9 solid habits that are ingrained, that you took the time to focus on them each and every single month. Some of them took a couple months because they were a little bit more challenging for you. I know that's like, for some people, that's like alcohol, right? Like alcohol might be a tough one for people, or like setting aside, like figuring out their scheduling, like, you know, maybe that takes a little bit longer for people, like whatever it is for each individual specifically. But man, if you do that over the time versus here comes January 1st, let me try to lose these 20 to 30 pounds as fast as I possibly can. Damn, this is so drastically different than what I'm used to. This sucks. This isn't sustainable. Let me jump ship. Oh, what are they doing? Okay, let me try what they're doing, right? And you start ping-ponging all over the place versus if you would have just stuck to the same. Maybe even if you took that extreme approach right off the bat on January 1st, but you're like, I'm just going to do part of it. And once I dominate that part of it, and once that's become a skill, and once that's become a new habit, then I'll take it a step further, right? Where everybody's trying to like throw the kitchen sink at you on January 1st and be like, okay, we're going to hydrate. We're going to put our feet in the ground. We're going to do cold plunges. We're going to do, you know, we're going to read for 30 minutes. We're going to do like all these things. Like, just pick one. Which one are you not doing right now? Which one do you think is going to move the needle for you the best? Like, which one do you think is the most doable? Which one's within grasp? Which one do you think you can just reach out and grab? It's not too far away. Like, start with that. And the crazy and the cool thing about that is you build confidence, right? You build belief in the process. The snowball starts rolling for you and you're like, oh, I can do this. And not only can you do it, you're setting out to do one single thing versus 10 different things. And when you actually stick to it, you and I were just talking about before we jumped on, we're like, man, I didn't feel like doing my workout today. It was a grind. Like, it was tough. Same thing. We showed up and we did it regardless of how we felt, right? We both felt like, oh man, I don't want to do this, but we showed up. And so for that, you and I, those are just deposits in the bank for us. So that next time when we feel like that, we're going to go, oh yeah, I remember that last time I didn't feel like doing it, but I still showed up. I could do that again this time. And so self-belief starts going up, confidence starts going up, and you start to really get some momentum. And before you know it, you're like, oh man, this is ingrained. I now identify as a person that when I say I'm going to do something, I do it regardless of how I feel, because I've done it. I have so much evidence. I have so many deposits in the bank. I already believe in myself. I'm already so confident that I could do it because look, I have evidence that I've done it time and time again. And I think that's so important, dude. So going back to that Jesse Itzler thing, that's huge, man. I think that's such a great approach. I take that with my clients anyways, not in that context, not in that realm, but I'm very much so like, hey, let's move at your pace. Here's what's required. I'll show them the list. You check them off as you go. And the goal is never to, like, if somebody start my program, the goal is never to check all of these off. I tell them on average, hey, it's going to take you like 4 to 8 weeks, depending, like 4 on the fast side if you're super experienced. 8 weeks, that's like middle of the road. And then a lot of people take beyond that, honestly, to get all the habits. And that's everything you can think of, just the fundamentals, right? Showing up 3 days per week with your resistance training, hydrating, sleep, etc., right? Like all the fundamentals. And so I make it very clear right off the bat, like, hey, we're not trying to accumulate all these things right now, day one. I just want you to pick 1 or 2 that you feel like you can buckle down on. And let's start with those. And then once you got those down consistently, it's just literally a checklist. I go on their weekly check-in and go, okay, are they still doing it? Yeah. Okay, great. Now we can introduce something new once they're doing it consistently. But I'm not looking at it and going, do they have the entire checklist checked off like week 1? Like I'm not looking at them like that. And I set that expectation right off the bat too. Like, hey, we're moving at your pace wherever you're at. Some people are faster, some people aren't, and that's fine.
I like that, dude. All right, that's a great approach. And what last kind of thing that comes to mind when it comes to fear too is like it's the unknown, right? It's like we just don't know what's going to happen, and we want to know what's going to happen. Like we want to go into things with the knowledge of exactly what is going to happen. We want to be comfortable, right? And it sparked when you were talking, kind of that thought on like it's the unknown. We got to go into the unknown, but I think the only way that you get more comfortable, going head on with fear, going head on with things that are uncomfortable is by doing them. And I actually did a thing. Do you remember when I was doing the blog like way back? Maybe I don't know if I ever talked about it when
I
I
don't
did.
remember.
It was a getting uncomfortable blog where every week I would do a blog on something that I did that was like it's like an activity.
Yeah, yeah, yep.
I
I
did like
remember.
skydiving and
Yep.
I did just new. It's basically kind of new things, right? It's like skydiving.
You're
Also,
introducing yourself to people
yeah,
out in public, right? Like,
that's right. I did that too. I totally forgot about that. Where every
yeah,
day for 60 days, I would
yeah.
start a
Somebody new.
conversation with a stranger in public, or I'd start 3 conversations with strangers in
I
public.
remember that.
It was so difficult. But after like 2 weeks of doing it, it became like super easy to like start conversations with people. But that was the unknown. That I was fearful. That could be a good exercise for people too, is like, you don't have to do that if you don't want to. You could do one person if that's something that's really fear. But like doing things that are uncomfortable and things that you're fearful of is only going to make the other things that you fear, that are unknown or uncomfortable, easier to do in the future.
Totally.
So that can be my last tip for people when it comes to that. Obviously we've talked about some good things today, like starting sloppy, just move in the right direction, kind of going a slow approach of, maybe every month or 2 months you build a new habit. And like by the time of the year, you have 6 to 12 new habits under your belt, not comparing yourself to others, and then just like doing uncomfortable, fearful things. Do you have anything else to add before we let these folks get on with their day?
Yeah, I would just say just taking imperfect action, man, taking sloppy action. Like you have to adopt that mindset and fight that urge and that feeling inside of us that we want everything to be perfect, everything lined up, everything to be crystal clear. We want to know all the answers before we even start. And the reality is it just doesn't operate, doesn't work like that. And so the faster we adopt the mindset of like, man, I know I feel this way and I want to know all the answers before I start, but actually to get this done and to accomplish this and to achieve what I want to achieve, it's going to require me to get uncomfortable. It's going to require me to not know the answers. It's going to require me to take imperfect action. It's going to require me to fail over and over and over, which is fine because I can adjust and maneuver and change along the way so that once I do have the answers that I was looking for, I can take that data, I can move forward, and I can actually accomplish what I set out to do in the first place. So hopefully that was helpful for you guys. We gave you guys a lot of gold nuggets. If you found that helpful, if you found it insightful and you want to share it with a friend, a family member, somebody you feel like you could benefit from, we love that you guys share and spread the word on being able to optimize you in the best, most optimal version of yourself, man. So hopefully you guys can listen to this on all platforms too: iTunes, Apple, Spotify, YouTube, all of it. And if you guys are following us on social, we love when you guys reach out, ask us questions, and who knows, we maybe have it a topic on our show as well. So we will catch you guys on the next one.